How's it going, fellow people of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or fellow gods of mischief, I suppose? Today is as I kind of did with WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, with the episode 1 reviews, I kind of do more of a first impressions, because finally, we've got Loki, episode 1, and to be honest, it's kind of interesting, kind of reflecting on the hype for the shows. WandaVision was such a big show because of the kind of intrigue of mystery. That's always a big sucker, and I'm not obviously negating the talent that was involved with Elizabeth Olsen and Catherine Winnick and just what a lot of people enjoyed there, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But, you know, not only did Kevin Feige say, and I'm paraphrasing here, that this show, out of all of the Marvel Disney Plus live action shows, this one would have kind of the most impact on the next phase, I believe, rather than the other ones. Don't get me wrong, they had set up. Arguably, WandaVision probably ranked second, especially leading into Multiverse of Madness and how her story ended with that little post-credit scene and whatnot, and the potential unleashing aspects as to what Agatha teased her with there. This has been, you know, quite some hype, not to mention that Loki in of himself, I mean, sure, I can't speak for everyone. Obviously, you may prefer Elizabeth Olsen's Scarlet Witch over Loki, but I think Loki and Tom Hiddleston being, you know, in the MCU since arguably quite the infancy, this has been a big show that has been hyped up. And for me, this, if you would have asked me way back months ago, before WandaVision even came out, my prediction of ranked shows for what I would look forward to most was completely off. Number 1 was Loki, but WandaVision, for example, was my least hyped one, but that turned out to be one of my favorites. Well, there's only been a couple. But yeah, enough rambling. It's just that this did live up to expectations, at least with episode 1. I thought it was a very, very solid episode. It really, really set the groundwork for where this is going to go in very interesting ways, obviously, with all of the teasers that we're about to get into, especially with the ending and what that entails with episodes to come, running into other Lokis and whatnot, and then obviously this kind of main one, but which kind of version of Loki is that. I welcome all of your theories, all of your comments down in the comment section below, because I'll be reading every single one of them, because obviously, while this is inspired by various different comic books that will influence this, especially considering that reveal at the end of the Loki in, what was it, 1858, it's still an adaptation, so that's what I love about stuff like this. It kind of keeps people, new and old fans, intrigued, even though sometimes people are very, very much so good at guessing what could happen, especially when it comes to already giving away Mephisto in this episode. I'm joking. Please, I hope nobody took that seriously. Or am I joking? So this episode picked up right kind of where we left off. It's kind of what you would have expected. Obviously seeing New York in 2012 with the Avengers, setting up just this Loki, this variant, if you will, moving forward. So we kind of saw that scene in Endgame again. He disappeared with the Tesseract into Mongolia in the desert, and that is where the Time Variance Agency Minutemen came in, and yeah, this is where it led to a very confused Loki. And especially one so characteristic of that time. I think that's very important, because one thing that I felt was done quite tastefully in this episode, but I got a feeling maybe some people might argue it was done very fast, but I suppose, you know, with the context of him literally seeing his future, obviously we got the Loki we had in 2012, one who wanted to rule, one who wanted to do all of that, see all of those events, and now almost, I don't know if I want to quite label him the Loki who tried to kill Thanos and, you know, was, you know, Loki's Odinson rather than the Loki he would have referred to himself back in 2012. You get what I'm trying to say, that it was a very fast development to kind of get him closer to where we actually left off with him dying, because that was a lot of trauma to experience in those recordings, and that was quite an interesting way of shoving that Loki a bit more forward and away from the 2012 version, who was just all about, yeah, Midgard is mine. Screw you, Earthlings, this, that, and the other. And that's one of the biggest things, other than, to be honest, there was a lot of cool things about this episode I enjoyed, is that mind state of Loki, seeing how he interacted with things, considering we've seen a Loki who's kind of grown a bit since then in the MCU as of the past few MCU films, but then obviously be catapulted into, oh god, I just saw loads of traumatic things, and my father calling me son and me with my brother. Do you know what I mean? I love that stuff. I'm a sucker for things like that. But yeah, I love the Time Variance Authority coming in, arresting him for, you know, the crimes against the sacred timeline. And this kind of reminds me of, to bring up the humor aspect. You know, MCU humor is an interesting thing amongst fans, you know. I love both the MCU and DC. I do have a preference with characters, and I also do have a preference with humor when it comes to shows and movies. I don't think it should be overplayed so much in something like almost even Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I felt like it did walk the line sometimes, but it was still tastefully done. But if it was done to this magnitude, I don't know if it would have suited it. But Loki, obviously the god of mischief, I felt like with every beat they did, I didn't find it with, you know, with some people's criticism of overstepping the MCU humor line or anything like that. Obviously, when it comes to Loki, I felt like the way he was reacting was pretty, well, Loki. As of this moment, they wanted to reset that timeline, which is when they placed a reset charge, which, yeah, appears to basically completely wipe out that whole timeline. So I'm guessing from like, I don't think I misinterpreted those reset charges that are deployed. It's like, I guess it like disintegrates everything outwards as of that. Look, the Time Variance Authority is so powerful. I mean, that is very, very clearly depicted and given across to the audience in the screen with things like bloody Infinity Stones in the drawer with guys using them as office wear. It's just insane. That's insane. But it also makes you think like, well, if there's Infinity Stones in the TVA and their little citadel, if you will, they could always be, you know, it leads you to think, well, that could kind of come back in the future. I'm not saying they're going to retread the same beat, but like, you know what I mean? And also, the reason why I'm saying that at the same time is because with Multiverse of Madness, with things like that to come, clearly, as of the events of this season that we're going to see unfold, I'm not going to call this out straight up like that because I don't know. I really don't know. But things are still going to be out of the TVA's control to the point of where we're getting the bigger narrative of the actual MCU films that you'll see in the theater rather than something in the live action show like Loki. So yeah, I'm intrigued as to what ripple effects this show will have, considering that this is meant to be the almighty TVA, you know, with the Timekeepers and stuff like that. Even though this is obviously all about maintaining the timeline, Loki basically being hired to stop himself and other selves, but his grand mischievous self out there, who we got teased with at the very end, it's still not going to resolve everything. And that's something that makes me think, oh man, like, what kind of things are we really going to learn and see in this series? Because this is where it really gets cosmic. I know that should go without saying, but that's what really makes me so particularly intrigued about this show, because it gets really into the DNA of the fabric of the universe to everything. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like some of the reveals that could come ahead will not only be really potentially, hopefully, really interesting and cool, and could even set up massive things with certain comic book characters from certain novels and stories who could be behind the curtain, which I don't really want to fully dive into. And no, I'm not even talking about Mephisto, because I don't want to, and as for the other characters, dive into so much right now, because there's a lot of actual opportunity here. And as Kevin Feige said himself, and I've just got the freaking quote up, it will have more impact on the MCU than any show so far. And that's definitely correct. I mean, I feel like we could already taste that with the just the grandness of the story that is at play here. I don't think we've, I mean, I was about to say, I don't think we've ever touched power on this scale before. I mean, I guess you could say the Infinity Stones and whatnot, but yeah, but they're being kept in an office drawer. So, I don't think we have. As we go into the actual TVA HQ itself, you know, you see Skrulls there. You see them getting kind of fleshed out more and more and more and more ever since their first appearance. And, you know, I know people are going to comment about Secret Invasion and whatnot, but like, this is what I mean. I feel like there's so many components at play here with what could be happening. Another thing I really liked is when he was getting his ticket, we saw the other guy who got disintegrated, but the video that played kind of showcasing and putting it in very much layman's terms of the events of the infancy to the end of everything of the universe. And that includes the war that happened long ago, from multiple branching and countless, as they say, unique timelines in this big grand multiversal war that battled each other for, I suppose, ultimate supremacy, as well as they say. Like, it's just this And one way I was thinking about it was, okay, but at the same time, if it is left unchecked in this way, yeah, it does make sense if you advance to such a point with many different timelines and stuff, then like you would gain the capability to travel from timeline to a different timeline and dimensions and whatnot, and then that would inevitably eventually cause war and stuff. So I found this like a really cool way to like just imagine that actually happening, but also I didn't even have to because they actually did show us it in their little cartoony ways. This nearly resulted in the total destruction of everything, but thanks to all-knowing timekeepers who emerged, they brought peace by reorganizing the multiverse into a single sacred timeline. Now, the thing is, what I was thinking is these timekeepers, my first thought is like, are we going to see them? Obviously, this is a part of the story, and maybe I'm reading too much into it and I'm reaching, but when you see the timekeepers in that little video animation, and the timekeepers are propping up certain buildings in the freaking city, they're carved out of things in this room, which reminds me, by the way, if you look at these screenshots that I'm showing, you can see how there's a little, like, I believe this is meant to be a little Stan Lee, who's being referenced as a freaking timekeeper, I guess, there. It's like more minimalistic Stan Lee references or Easter eggs, if you know what I mean, that's being kind of provided now, versus obviously what we had before, for very obvious reasons. But back onto the timekeepers, I would love to know your thoughts about that. Are we going to see them? Are they actually going to be what they are presenting that they are, if these all grand dictating kind of making sure the timeline, the sacred timeline, is safe? Because I don't know, man, I feel like the ambiguity here is suspicious, and I know that it sounds reaching, but what if the timekeepers aren't actually in control? Loki gets it explained to him in this moment, just like everyone who is probably wondering why they're there, because if you are a variant yourself, you still feel like you are your genuine self, which you are. It's kind of paradoxical, you are at the same time. But whatever it was, they give examples of stepping off your path, being late for work. It creates this Nexus Event, which, you know, Nexus, whether that's from WandaVision references or Wanda herself, the Scarlet Witch being a Nexus being, meaning there's only like one of her throughout any kind of freaking multiverse. She's the same being across all of them. I'm sorry for my really weird articulation. It's exactly things like this which I feel like are going to get mentioned maybe in Multiverse of Madness, and this is just cluing us in even more, making us so much more familiar with this terminology even. And that's probably going to get stacked upon us tenfold throughout the episodes of Loki, considering we're with the TVA this whole time. After this is where we meet Owen Wilson in France in, I believe, 1549. It starts off with how this hunter and his Minutemen responded just to a routine Nexus event, you know, just something that shouldn't really be happening in 1549 in France, and it appears when they arrived, someone got the jump on them. Same stab wounds, consistent with the others, I'm guessing from his knives and whatnot. And then we had that moment with the kid who points to frickin' Mephisto on the... I'm joking. But... you know what I mean, but really that is more likely and is to symbolize just Loki being like a mischievous little devil, if you will. It's more that, but yeah, I can imagine some people were like, proper like going at it, like what is going on? Now the reasoning behind Loki being aware that they probably traveled back in time, just it's kind of funny that he thinks is to thwart his attempt for his ascendance to the God throne or whatever. He recognized two different Tony Stark's cologne. I don't know if that was a bit of a reach, but whatever. He was aware of that, but obviously at this point he wasn't aware of his original or technically future fate. Around this time, there's a whole bunch of kind of coming to terms with his fate is his own, but then again, is this, you know, as Owen Wilson's Mobius presents, it's sure you believe that if you want to. Another thing I really liked is like the design of the TVA. As I said, Citadel. It looks like this utopian society almost, or like Coruscant in Star Wars. I don't know if it reminded anyone else of that. I don't know. And this brings me to the score as well. It was really good. I'm a sucker for stuff like that because, as I always say, without these moments of music in these scenes, it would just be a scene. Sure, you could maybe be captivated by the acting, but it's just nothing without it at the same time. This is what brings me to when Mobius was talking to Loki about himself. Why does he do the things he does? It's almost like therapy. And I was waiting for Loki to make a joke about that, but he didn't, to be fair. And, you know, there's people even having theories that what if Mobius here is like a future version of Loki, and that's how he knows himself so well, and that's how he knew how to approach him to crack him like an egg, so to speak. I don't know about that one, but like, this is what I love about the fan theories. It really does get interesting when it comes to these shows. That, yeah, again, this is more like, obviously Falcon and the Winter Soldier was a lot more like the status quo. It was just like, okay, we're gonna, you know, it was decent, but like, this one's a lot more in line with WandaVision, and there's a whole lot of ambiguity at the minute. I mean, we've got some clarity. It's like, oh, other Lokis. We're going to see other Lokis, and we did even see another Loki in this episode, like when we got a flashback to Loki and his time of meddling in the events of man, if you will, because he was friggin' DB Cooper, because he lost a bet to Thor. That's hilarious. But yeah, the thing I appreciated most about this scene in this room, like even skipping past all the stuff that we've briefly mentioned, like when he escaped and you know, even turned the belt round on the other lady, and how he was flipping back and forth her in the time there, and the Infinity Stones in the drawer. It led to some very good performances. I really like, you know, Owen Wilson. I don't have too much of an opinion on him. I've seen him my whole life, but to see him again after a while of, I guess, not seeing him, now paired with Tom Hiddleston in these scenes, it was very compelling. I thought Tom Hiddleston was great, obviously, especially when he got back into the room by himself and he was just looking at everything. It was just a really touching way in terms of the concept of, as I kind of mentioned earlier, propelling Loki forward to as close as possible of the Loki we had at Endgame. And ultimately, that led up to his point of where he was, I guess, understanding that he can't return to his timeline. We had so much almost mini development within such a space of minutes of like him even being fully aware of like a self-psycho and analytical approach of how he says he doesn't like hurting people, he does it because he has to, because he's had to. It's all a part of the illusion, you know, the cruel elaborate trick conjured by the weak to inspire fear, which he self-acknowledges that is a desperate attempt for control. And yeah, it's like, okay, it's like a breakthrough. But this is where we get to a scene in Oklahoma 1858, and we see the Minutemen pop out. The time, I don't know if anyone plays Nintendo, but that just reminded me of Xenoblade Chronicles with the blade just stuck in the grass. Did anyone else think that? Please, just let me know. But anyway, this weapon or device or whatever it was, the time signature displayed the early 3rd millennium, so obviously that did not belong in this time era. But that's when they see the hooded figure out there, standing there, very Ahsoka Jedi style, with a lamp, setting fire. And yeah, that is the apparent Dark Loki we have to deal with. And yet again, this is the opportunity of this series that is so compelling. We're seeing the potential of all of these different types, and that's present within the source material as well. And I think lots of people are going to be looking forward to what opportunities they took there and decided to implement in the show. I also look forward to this Loki, like, it's weird, I was going to say our Loki, but that's technically the one that went and died in Endgame. But I feel like this is the point of what I'm saying. This Loki, this variant will become our new Loki that we refer to, because I feel like throughout his travels of meeting these different ones, it will, I feel like it will further grow him, and it will further cement him to be, well, the future Loki going forward. And that's another fascinating thing to consider, because if you can't go back to his timeline, where is this going to actually end? But anyway, guys, that is like my ramble breakdown and first impressions of the Loki series. I'm very happy about it. When I get a bit more time on my hands next week, I will be going a bit more into a deep dive. But as I did with all the other episode ones, I wanted to give more of a blabber off the top of my head of just raw, unfiltered thoughts on the new Marvel Disney Plus shows, and in this case the 3rd installment, and by far apparently the most impacting into the future of the MCU. So what did you think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm really excited to read your comments. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a like on it. It really does help out. And if you're interested in following me even more, links to my social media are indeed in the top pinned comment of the comment section, which is my comment, Twitter, Patreon, Discord server, you name it. But that's everything, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you gods of mischief and people of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the next video. Goodbye.